for me, police in my neighborhood was not something that we gravitated towards. It was not something to embrace. Where I come from, you see the police, you go the other way. Didn't hear much good about the police, didn't hear much good police community interaction. The police were a necessity, and I do mean an absolute necessity. If you had to have them, then it was necessary. But if you didn't, you handled things, your own way, and that was just the culture of it. So I wasn't drawn to policing by any means. It was nothing that I ever thought about, not a career that I thought about. But when I look back on it, in hindsight, and how I was gravitating towards policing without in the subconscious way, not in a conscious manner. And that would go back to my childhood. Some of my friends, we would often go the other way when we seen police, but just happened in this zone that started it would be, we see a police, he's riding on his motorcycle, and he's riding up, and he's absolutely, a police officer with the motorcycle, with the boots, the jacket, the helmet, and we were going the other way. And then one of my friends said, "Daddy, Daddy," and so it's like, that's my daddy. It was like, Daddy? We didn't know his dad was a police officer. But when he pulled up, then it was almost an instant change. And when I look back about the first police officer I actually touched, the first police officer that I actually could feel and see and had a relationship with was him. And he was cool. He was a very handsome guy, shiny motorcycle boots, everything intact with the sunglasses on. He was the epitome of a motorcycle officer, but he looked like me. A black man who looked like me, and he was the guy who looked out for us when he rolled through, and he waved, and he came through the neighborhood, and it was like we were transitioning ourselves. But for the first time, we didn't run. Even we wasn't doing anything wrong. Let's be clear to say we were just young people, playing basketball or softball or whatever the latest sport, throw up, tackle football. We were doing those things. We wasn't doing anything wrong, but you didn't have to be doing anything wrong for the police to confront you. It was a breakdown of barriers that had existed because you just didn't run across police officers who were that friendly. Even though we had programs with officer friendly, searching for officer friendly was a needle in a haystack. And so we looking for officer friendly. Officer friendly may have been that friendly in another neighborhood, but in my neighborhood wasn't that friendly. And so he was our guy. And he was moving us in a different direction because his son became a police officer. His nephew was a police officer. His twin brother was a police officer. So he affected a lot of us who would become police officers in the neighborhood because he was that type of man. He was that type, he presented that presence. I tell that story because before then it was a barrier that existed in my mind about what a police officer was, who he was, because this is generational. Police officers through decades or a century or two of police community relations that were not so great. So it was just better to have distance so you don't get caught up in anything, because the reason I tell that story is we have to give a talk to children, to our kids, especially in a black family. And most people, they do not understand the talk. But I had a talk. It was, hey, don't do this. When you go out, you see the police, don't do this. You go down here, don't walk with too many people. Don't ride in the car with too many people. Say yes, sir, no, sir, and all these things right here. Keep your hands on the steering wheel. Make sure you're observing at all times. Double check and ask a police officer, tell him, repeat back to him or her what they wanted done. Now, who gets that kind of lecture every time you leave a house? So we didn't want to have a confrontation. So I tell that story because he broke down barriers. He broke down everything that was in my mind about who a police officer was and is and should be. And it does make all the difference. That's exactly what we're talking about. That's why I have to be a believer in police community relations, because what he did during that time, it made me take notice. I still wasn't like, I'm going to be a police officer, but I didn't run either when I saw him. If I ran to him, and he was the neighborhood, hero. He come through and he checking on the kids. And that meant, my mother would say, "Hey, you seen Mr. Christian?" And he was Mr. Christian, he had a profound impact on not just me, but other people. Years later, and that story for a couple of reasons. Years later, when I rise up the ranks, guess who worked for me? Mr. Christian. He worked for me in the traffic unit. I was over the traffic unit. And I treated him with all the dignity and respect that he deserved, because he was the longest serving officer of any color or any demographics on the department before he died. And he was a great man, well respected by everyone. So I saw the respect. He had respect, and that's the kind of, he wasn't a chief, he wasn't a captain, a major, he didn't achieve that rank. He was a senior corporal. And he was a leader, and he affected people's lives internally and externally. So that's why I tell that story. When down the street, who a person who was like family to me, was one of the first female police officers who came from a neighborhood that joined the police department, and then she was a female. Then she rode with another female, and those are the things that was impacting me when I look back. They're like, two female police officers are partners. That was unheard of and unseen, and they were black, and they rode the neighborhood, and she lived down the street and so close to me, we were like family. And then later, a person who I called uncle, who was relative by marriage, at the time, he was a police officer, and had been there a long time, and so it became a reality, in my final stage, that I could become a police officer when I was working at the sheriff's office. And a guy said, "You'll make a good police officer, and you should think about that, and there's better opportunities there." And all of that was a reflection of where I had been. Not only do the communities expect a police department to reflect who they are, and that's only one aspect of it. The reflection of the demographics of the population and versus the police department can be critical to police community relations. Just like I told you that story earlier, and barriers were broken down. That's how easy barriers can be broken. And we need to bridge that gap that exists. And the only way to bridge that gap is to have a very diverse workforce. That's the first aspect. The second aspect is, it's just not enough to have it. You have to engage. You have to go out and engage. You have to be visible. You have to be seen. You have to treat people with dignity and respect. You have to be concerned about all the factors that are relevant inside of a community. So on one end you have that. The next end you have to go to work. One is static, and the other is kinetic, and you have to have both. You just one without the other, you won't progress. So yes, I do believe that.
Let's talk about the attack on your police department in Dallas while you were there. I think you told me, and I wasn't sure, I couldn't find it on the internet, you had a supervisory touch on some of that investigation. Is that accurate?
Well, yes, I was over the investigations aspect for a particular part of it. And so,
because it was such a massive investigation.
It was a massive investigation, but in the most horrific time in my career, the worst day of my career, the worst term that I've ever seen, still reflecting on it. And it still, is that today. The 5-year anniversary is approaching here, very soon. That's probably not a week that would go by, and not a day when I would turn a corner to know where something happened where 5 men, died that day. 5 police officers, died that day. So it was very impactful. But just going through that, there's some things that I've never watched to this day, too horrific, things that were at my disposal, being in briefings, and it's hard to try to capture something so horrific, but all you have to know is it exists, and it was there, and it was real, and it's present, to know that there is something captured on video that shows you 5 men losing their life. So yeah, that should be impactful it is impactful for hundreds of officers who, it wasn't like I didn't know those men. I knew every last one of them. So these aren't something that I heard about him or where did he work? Yeah, no, I knew them. They worked for me in some capacities at some point. The outside agency worked in a capacity around me. We met, we spoke. So these, when you know someone and that happens, it's no longer just some footnote in history that it happened at your department. These are people that I knew, came up in the department with, had mentored, provided leadership for, and they were gone. One day they were here, 1 hour they were here, and then they were gone. And, very tough. I think when you have such a tragedy, such as that, when we were at the intersection of police and community relations at this point in time in our history, we've had them, before, and many of the police officers don't have that context of history to be involved in it right there on the spot, and we were in Dallas. History came to our front door, and we were right there. And what it did for me is give me a broader view of what was needed, and the maintenance that was needed, the consistency that was needed. All the failures came to light, all the successes, because most people gloss over this fact, and it is Dallas police at the time was considered one of the most progressive, if not at the top of major police departments in the nation, the most progressive community policing department in the nation. And the question became, how did that happen in Dallas? Why would that happen in Dallas? So, and a person who obviously had some kind of mental issues that had affected him from maybe the military service that he served in, and having some type of PSD, and not in his right mind, because no one in their right mind takes a stance to shoot police officers, kill police officers, no one in their right mind. And so when that happened, it brought me into a greater point of view, a broader view of things, about all the things that were needed, all the things that we were lacking, and we were doing pretty good. I mean, we were doing the best from other people's standards, other department standards who visited Dallas, and we engaged with youth. We were doing de-escalation and reasonable alternatives before it was a norm. We were talking about implicit bias and training, and every point we were making to make better police community relations, and then that happened. Right before that, we had commanders. It was something that was out of the norm. They walked with protesters because it was a peaceful protest until that happened. So you had police commanders walking with protesters who were actually protesting the police, but they were taking pictures. They had pictures. They were, it was a joyful moment.
Some of them ended up dead.
The officers who was in protecting ended up dead, but the commanders who were walking with them, they were under fire. And just when the protest was over, and so when we tell history, we tell it correctly. It was, protests are that. They are that. They're loud. They're voicing opinions at people. It's a protest, but it was over. And
you don't blame the protests for motivating this individual.
Protesting is an American right. You have a right to peacefully assemble to, redress your grievances against the government. I'm a believer in the First Amendment. So yes, you have a right to do it. So why would I be upset when people decide to exercise their First Amendment right? Police are there to protect those rights, but we're also there to protect other citizens, and we're there to protect our very own selves. And that is where the intersections meet, and sometimes they don't actually cross paths that are congruent to each other. I've been put on the ground and proned out for no reason. You know why? Yeah, why? Yeah, that's what happened in neighborhoods that I come from. You see the divide. That's why we're here now. That's why I love policing. That's why I think this is the best time. This is why I think the challenges of this time calls for right mind, good right. Why you got the talk that I spoke about, so you didn't end up with an investigation that cleared people when they clearly had done something in the neighborhood. So it's generational. Yeah, don't do this, do that, to the point where I've been stopped by the police as an adult. I was lost one night in another city, looking for a place that the construction didn't meet the directions. I got stopped by police, and instinctively, you know what I did? Turned on the light in my car, turned off the car, put my keys on the dash, put my hands on the wheel. I was making sure that nothing happened to me on a dark road. Now, why did I do that? It was something that I had been taught to do. Do not do these things so you can survive an encounter.
Do you envision a Prince George's County Police Department and a Prince George's County community where that talk doesn't happen anymore? Can you imagine that?
I would like, Martin Luther King said, talked about a dream. I dream of those days. I dream of days where things are better. So why wouldn't I be optimistic about better police-community relations? Why wouldn't I be optimistic about America? Anybody who isn't is probably not on the right road for us resolving issues and having resolution. So yeah, I believe that. I have to. I'm optimistic for it. I'm hopeful for the future. I hope my children I hope my future, if my children give the talk to my grandson or future grandchildren, then I hope it's a lesser talk than what I gave. But I long for the day that we don't have to have those kind of talks. But most people, from my experience, will tell you a similar story. They had talks from family members, influential members, head of households. It happens. And if it happens today, if I gave it, then we're not where we need to be. And I did. And I worry about that. I worry about today's children who confront things on the spot, and I talk about get through that, and then you can address the issues that you believe you were wronged in, even if it's unjust, even if something happens where you end up going to jail, then we can still talk about it. That's what you have a process for, and we can fight that. And because I want them to get to that point. And the vast majority of police officers do very well. They do this job with dignity and honor and respect. That's what they do.
It's the world's hardest job.
Now, we take this percentage and we flip it over and we make that percentage be policing is totally wrong, and nothing ever good happens in policing. And that's not true. So you can't make a sweeping indictment. You don't make sweeping indictments of certain segments in the community from a police perspective, and the community should not make sweeping indictments of a police profession with 900,000 police, because if it was 900,000 bad police, you would feel it.